My name is Mara Ellison. I am 34 years old, and the afternoon I sat in a law office in Wilmington holding a sealed envelope with my name handwritten across the front in shaky cursive, watching an attorney I'd never met carefully explain that a man named Thomas Vale had died 3 weeks earlier and specifically requested I be present for the reading of certain personal effects. My phone started buzzing in my purse. My mother. Third call in 10 minutes. I let it go to voicemail. The attorney, a man in his mid-40s named Caleb Rourke, slid a second folder across the desk and said something I didn't fully process at first because I was too busy trying to remember who Thomas Vale even was. Mr. Vale made it very clear that only you were to receive this, not your family, not anyone else, just you. I stared at the envelope. I don't understand. I barely knew him. He knew you. That's when my phone buzzed again. My brother this time. I looked at Caleb. Can I ask you something? Of course. Why is my family calling me right now? He didn't answer right away. He just looked at me with the kind of careful expression lawyers use when they know more than they're allowed to say. I can't speak to that, but I will say this. Mr. Vale was very intentional about the timing of this and very specific about who should and shouldn't be involved. Before I tell you what was inside that envelope and why my sister went completely silent when I finally called her back 2 hours later, let me ask you something. Have you ever had your family panic over something you didn't even understand yet? 3 weeks earlier, I'd been living my normal life. I work from home doing medical billing for a small network of clinics. It's boring. It pays enough. I have a 6-year-old daughter named Sophie. Her father and I divorced 2 years ago, and he contributes when he remembers to, which isn't often. We live in a rental house that's fine but not permanent. I'm tired most of the time, but I'm managing. Then I got the letter. It came on a Tuesday. Plain envelope. Law firm return address. I opened it standing in my kitchen while Sophie watched cartoons in the living room. The letter said that Thomas Vale had passed away on November 4th, and that I had been named as a beneficiary in his estate. There would be a formal reading of specific materials on November 29th at 2 p.m. My presence was required. I stood there trying to place the name. Thomas Vale. I vaguely remembered an older man from when I was a kid. Quiet. Always around during certain family gatherings. I think he lived a few streets over from my grandparents' house. My parents called him Tom. He had a workshop in his garage. I remembered going there once or twice with my dad when I was maybe 7 or 8. But that was it. I didn't know him. I called my mother. She answered on the first ring. Mara, hi, sweetie. What's going on? I just got a weird letter. Do you remember a man named Thomas Vale? Silence. Then carefully, she said, Why are you asking? I got a letter from a lawyer saying he died and left me something. Her voice changed. Left you something? What do you mean, left you something? I don't know. It just says I'm named in his estate. I have to go to a reading next week. Another pause. That doesn't make any sense. That's what I thought. Why would he leave you anything? You barely knew him. I know. That's why I'm asking. She was quiet again. Then she said, What exactly does the letter say? I read it to her. When I finished, she said, I think there's been some kind of mistake. Maybe. Don't go. I looked at the letter again. What? Don't go to that meeting. It's probably some kind of scam or identity theft or something. Mom, it's from a real law firm. I looked them up. Still, you don't know what this is, and you don't want to get involved in something that has nothing to do with you. If it has nothing to do with me, why would they send it to me? She didn't answer that. Instead, she said, Let me talk to your father. We'll figure this out. Okay, but don't do anything until you hear from us. After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table staring at the letter. Something about the way my mother had reacted felt wrong. That night, my father called. His voice was calm but firm. Your mother told me about the letter. Yeah, I think you should ignore it. Why? Because Thomas Vale was an old family acquaintance, and whatever this is, it's probably a clerical error. You don't want to waste your time sitting in some lawyer's office over nothing. But what if it's not nothing? It is. How do you know? He paused. Then he said, Mara, I'm asking you not to go. The way he said it made my stomach turn. Asking, not suggesting. I'll think about it, I said. We hung up. The next day, my brother Gavin called. Hey, so Mom said you got some kind of inheritance letter? Yeah. From who? A guy named Thomas Vale. I don't really remember him, he laughed. Okay, so random old dude dies and leaves you money? That's weird as hell. I know. How much are we talking? I don't know yet. Well, when you find out, let me know. Maybe we can split it. I'm not splitting anything, Gavin. He laughed again, but it sounded forced. I'm kidding. But seriously, you should probably tell Mom and Dad before you do anything. They're kind of freaking out. Why? I don't know. You know how they are. After I hung up, I texted my sister Lena. Did Mom or Dad call you about this Thomas Vale thing? She didn't respond for 3 hours. Then, finally, she wrote back. Yeah, they told me. You should probably just let it go. Why does everyone keep saying that? She didn't respond again. I sat with my daughter that night, brushing her hair before bed, and tried to figure out why a man I barely remembered would leave me anything, and why my entire family was suddenly so interested in making sure I didn't find out what it was. The meeting was scheduled for November 29th. I didn't tell my family I was going. I dropped Sophie off at my ex's place that morning and drove to the law office alone. It was in a quiet building downtown, tasteful, professional. Caleb Rourke met me in the lobby. Ms. Ellison? Yes, thank you for coming. This way. We went into a small conference room. There was a table, a few chairs, and a stack of folders. He gestured for me to sit. Before we begin, I want to clarify a few things. Mr. Vale's will was very specific about how this part of his estate should be handled. You are the sole recipient of what I'm about to give you. No other family members were named. No other individuals were included. Okay? He also left instructions that if anyone attempted to contest or interfere with this transfer, certain additional documentation would be released to you immediately. I stared at him. What kind of documentation? That will become clear shortly. He opened one of the folders and pulled out a single sheet of paper. This is a letter Mr. Vale wrote to you. He asked that you read it before we proceed with anything else. He slid it across the table. I picked it up. The handwriting was shaky, but deliberate. It started with my name. Mara, if you're reading this, then I've passed, and you've come looking for answers. I'm glad. You deserve them. I've known your family for a long time, longer than you probably realize, and I've carried a truth that wasn't mine to tell while I was alive. But I made a promise to myself that if I died before this was made right, I would leave you the tools to understand what was taken from you. I don't expect you to remember me well, but I remember you, and I'm sorry I stayed quiet for as long as I did. What's in this envelope is yours. It always should have been. The rest will make sense once you see it. I hope you're doing well, I hope you're happy, and I hope this helps you understand why certain people acted the way they did. You deserve better. Thomas Vale. I read it twice. Then I looked at Caleb. What does this mean? He handed me the sealed envelope. Inside are personal documents, records, and a few items Mr. Vale kept in his possession for over 30 years. He believed they belonged to you, legally and morally. I opened the envelope slowly. Inside were several things: a birth certificate, not the one I'd seen before, a different one, with different information, a handwritten note on hospital stationery, dated 34 years ago, with my mother's name at the top and a physician's signature at the bottom, a photograph of a man I didn't recognize, standing next to my mother in what looked like a park. She was young, maybe 25, and she was smiling in a way I'd never seen before, and a folded piece of notebook paper with my name written across the top in my mother's handwriting, followed by a sentence that made my hands start shaking. If anyone ever asks, we tell them David is the father. No exceptions. I set the paper down. Caleb was watching me carefully. I assume you have questions. I couldn't speak. He continued. Mr. Vale was a family friend, but he was also a witness to certain decisions your family made when you were born. Decisions that, according to him, were not made in your best interest. I looked at the birth certificate again. The name under father wasn't David Ellison. It was someone else, a name I'd never heard before. I looked up at Caleb. "Who is this?" "That," he said quietly, "is something you'll need to ask your family." That's when my phone started ringing. My mother, then my father, then my brother. I let them all go to voicemail. Caleb folded his hands on the table. "I need to tell you one more thing. Mr. Vale also left you a property deed, a small parcel of land in northern Delaware. It was purchased in 1990 and held in trust under his name. According to his will, it was always intended for you, but he couldn't transfer it while he was alive without raising questions he wasn't prepared to answer. Why? Because your family believed they had legal control over any assets connected to your birth, and he knew if he tried to give this to you directly, they would intervene." I stared at him. How did he know that? He leaned back slightly. "Because 34 years ago, your family asked him to help them bury this, and he did, and he's regretted it ever since." My phone buzzed again. This time it was my sister. The text said, "Please call me, right now." I looked at Caleb. "What am I supposed to do with this?" "That's up to you. But I will say this. Mr. Vale made it very clear that if your family tries to silence you, contest this, or pressure you into giving any of this back, there are additional records. Medical, legal, financial, and he left instructions for me to release them to you immediately." I felt something cold settle in my chest. He knew they'd come after me. Caleb nodded slowly. He knew. I sat in my car in the parking garage for 20 minutes after leaving Caleb's office, staring at the folder in my passenger seat. My phone had 11 missed calls, 6 from my mother, 3 from my father, 2 from Lena. I didn't call any of them back. Instead, I drove to my friend Nina's house. She worked from home and I knew she'd be there. When she opened the door and saw my face, she stepped aside without asking questions. We sat at her kitchen table. I spread everything out in front of her. The birth certificate, the photograph, the note in my mother's handwriting, the hospital record, the property deed. Nina read through it all slowly. Then she looked up at me. "Mara, do you understand what this means?" I shook my head. She pointed to the birth certificate. "This says your father isn't David Ellison. It's someone named," she squinted at the faded type, "Michael Caro. I don't know who that is, and this note," she picked up the folded paper. "This is your mother saying to lie about it. I know," she set it down. "So Thomas Vale kept all of this for 34 years. Why? According to the lawyer, my family asked him to help cover it up, and he did, but he kept copies." She stared at me. "That's not just covering something up, Mara. That's burying it with paperwork." I felt my throat tighten. "What am I supposed to do?" She didn't answer right away. Then she said, "You call them, and you ask them directly, and you don't let them talk their way out of it." I nodded, but I didn't call them that night. I went home, put Sophie to bed, and sat on my couch staring at the documents until I couldn't keep my eyes open anymore. The next morning, my mother showed up at my house. I was making breakfast when I heard the knock. I opened the door, and there she was, dressed like she was going to brunch, holding her purse with both hands. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. She walked into the living room but didn't sit down. "You went to that meeting." "Yes. After we asked you not to. You asked me not to. You didn't explain why." She set her purse on the coffee table. "Because I knew it would upset you." "Why would it upset me?" She didn't answer. I crossed my arms. "Who is Michael Caro?" Her face went pale. "Where did you hear that name?" "Thomas Vale left me my real birth certificate, the one with his name on it." She sat down hard on the couch. "Mara, this is exactly why I didn't want you going to that meeting." "So it's true." She closed her eyes. "It's complicated." "No, it's not. Either David Ellison is my father or he isn't." She opened her eyes and looked at me. "He raised you. He's your father in every way that matters. That's not what I asked." She stood up. "This is ancient history, Mara. It doesn't change anything. It changes everything." She shook her head. "You don't understand. You were too young. You don't know what it was like." "Then explain it to me." She looked away. Your father and I were going through a hard time. We'd been trying to have kids for years. It wasn't working. We separated for a few months. I met someone. It didn't last. But I got pregnant, with me. She nodded. And by the time I realized it, your father and I had reconciled. We decided to work things out. And when you were born, we decided it didn't matter. We were a family, so you just lied. We protected you. From what? From this. From questions. From people treating you differently. Or from people knowing the truth. She flinched. Your father loves you, Mara. He always has. Then why does the birth certificate say someone else's name? Because we changed it, legally, when you were 6 months old. I stared at her. You falsified a legal document. We corrected it, she said, her voice sharp now. David adopted you. Officially. We went through the proper channels. Michael Caro signed away his rights. It was done legally. Then why did Thomas Vale keep the original? She looked at me like I'd slapped her. Because he had no right to, or because you asked him to help bury it and he kept proof in case you ever tried to rewrite history. She stood up. I came here to explain, not to be accused. I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm asking you to tell me the truth. I just did. No, you told me the version you've been telling yourselves for 34 years. She grabbed her purse. I'm not doing this with you right now. She walked to the door, then stopped and turned around. That land Thomas left you? You should sell it or sign it over because it was never supposed to be yours in the first place. What does that mean? It means your grandfather bought that land in 1989. He intended it for your father, for our family. And Thomas had no business holding on to it. Then why is it in Thomas's name? She didn't answer. She just left. After she was gone, I sat on my couch and stared at the documents again. Something wasn't adding up. I called Caleb. He answered on the second ring. Miss Ellison, I need to ask you something. The land Thomas left me. My mother says it was supposed to go to my father. He was quiet for a moment. That's not accurate. How do you know? Because the deed shows it was purchased by Thomas Vale in 1990 using funds provided by your biological father, Michael Caro. It was held in trust specifically for you. Your mother's father, your grandfather may have been involved in some way, but the legal ownership has always been Thomas's. And the intended recipient was always you. So my mother lied. Or she believes a version of events that isn't supported by the documentation. I felt my chest tighten. Why would Michael Caro give Thomas money to buy land for me if he signed away his rights? That's a very good question. Do you know the answer? Not definitively. But I can tell you that Mr. Vale left a sealed letter addressed to you. He instructed me to give it to you only if your family attempted to claim the property or discredit his intentions. They just did. Then I'll have it ready for you tomorrow. I hung up and immediately called Nina. My mom just tried to tell me the land was supposed to go to my dad. Was it? No. Caleb confirmed it was bought with money from my biological father and held in trust for me. So your mom is lying. Or she doesn't know the truth. Mara, she knows. I drove back to Caleb's office the next day. He handed me a second sealed envelope. This one was thicker. Inside was another letter from Thomas, along with several additional documents. I read the letter first. Mara, if you're reading this, then your family has started trying to control the narrative. I expected that, so I want to give you the full picture. Michael Caro was a good man. He loved your mother. But when she went back to David, Michael didn't fight it. He thought it was better for you to grow up in a stable home with two parents who wanted you, so he signed away his legal rights. But he didn't walk away completely. He asked me to make sure you were taken care of. He gave me money to buy the land. He told me to hold it until you were old enough to understand. He also asked me to keep records, because he didn't trust that your mother's family would be honest about where you came from. He was right. Over the years, I watched your parents erase him, from documents, from photos, from conversations. And I kept proof, not because I wanted to hurt anyone, but because I believed you had a right to know. Michael died in 2003, car accident. He never married, never had other kids, and in his will, he left a letter for you. I kept it. It's in this envelope. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. but I'm not sorry I kept the truth alive. You deserve that much. Thomas. My hands were shaking. I pulled out the second letter. It was written on lined paper, dated April 2003, and addressed to me. Mara, I don't know if you'll ever read this. I don't even know if you'll ever know I existed. But I wanted you to have something from me. Something real. I loved your mother. I would have loved you too. But life doesn't always work out the way you hope. When you were born, I wanted to be your father. But your mother chose David, and I understood. He could give you stability, a family, a future. I couldn't compete with that, so I signed the papers. But I didn't forget you. I gave Thomas money to buy land in your name. I told him to hold it until you were old enough to need it. I don't know what kind of person you'll become, but I hope you're happy. I hope you're strong, and I hope you know that even though I wasn't there, I thought about you. Every single day. I'm sorry I couldn't be your dad, but I'm glad you're in the world. Love, Michael. I read it 3 times, then I folded it carefully and put it back in the envelope. Caleb was watching me. Are you all right? I don't know. There's one more thing. He handed me a photograph. It was old, faded, but clear. A man was holding a baby. The baby was wearing a pink blanket. The man was smiling. On the back, in faded pen, it said, Mara, 2 weeks old, April 1990. I stared at it. That's him? Caleb nodded. That's Michael Caro. I looked at the photo for a long time. Then I put it in my purse and stood up. Thank you. What are you going to do? I'm going to talk to my father. I drove to my parents' house that evening. My father answered the door. We need to talk. He stepped aside and let me in. My mother was in the kitchen. She saw me and immediately stood up. Mara, I don't think... Sit down, I said. She sat. I put the folder on the table. I know Michael Caro bought the land. I know he wanted me to have it. I know he wrote me a letter. And I know you've been lying about all of it for 34 years. My father's face went hard. Where did you get that? Thomas Vale kept everything, every document, every letter, every piece of proof. My mother's voice cracked. He had no right. He had every right, because you asked him to help you bury the truth. And he did. But he kept copies, just in case. My father stood up. This doesn't change anything. It changes everything. He shook his head. You're still my daughter. No, I'm the daughter you raised. But I'm not your daughter, and you've known that my entire life. The room went silent. My mother started crying. My father just stared at me. And I realized something. They weren't sorry. They were just sorry I found out. I didn't go back to my parents' house after that night. I didn't call. I didn't text. I just stopped. My mother tried reaching out, long voicemails about how I was misunderstanding everything, how they'd only ever tried to protect me, how I was tearing the family apart over something that happened before I was even aware of the world. I deleted them. My father sent a single email, short, formal. It said that I was being unfair, that he'd raised me and provided for me and loved me, and that none of this would have mattered if Thomas Vale hadn't interfered. I didn't respond. Gavin called once and said I was being dramatic, that it didn't matter who my real dad was because David had been there my whole life and wasn't that what counted? I told him he could think whatever he wanted, and I hung up. Lena was the only one who didn't push. She sent me a text 2 weeks after everything came out. I'm sorry. I knew some of it, not all of it, but enough. I should have told you. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I wrote back. Why didn't you? She replied an hour later. Because I was scared, of Mom, of what it would do to the family. I know that's not an excuse, but it's the truth. I didn't respond after that. What was there to say? The land Thomas left me was real. 23 acres in northern Delaware, undeveloped, quiet, surrounded by trees. Caleb helped me finalize the transfer. It was mine, legally, completely. My mother called it theft. My father called it manipulation. Gavin asked if I was going to sell it and implied I owed the family something if I did. I didn't owe them anything. I went to see the property on a Saturday in early December. I brought Sophie with me. We drove out past the suburbs, past the developments, into an area where the roads were narrow and the houses were spread far apart. The land was at the end of a gravel driveway, marked by an old mailbox with the number 441 painted on the side. I parked the car and got out. Sophie ran ahead laughing, kicking up leaves. I stood there for a moment, looking at the trees, the open space, the quiet. This was mine. Not because I'd fought for it, not because I'd demanded it, but because a man I barely remembered had loved someone enough to make sure I had something real, something that couldn't be rewritten or erased or explained away. I pulled out the photograph Caleb had given me, the one of Michael holding me when I was 2 weeks old. I studied his face. I didn't see myself in him, but I saw something else. Kindness, sadness, hope. He hadn't wanted to leave me. He'd been forced to. And even after he signed the papers, even after my mother chose David, even after the family buried him from the narrative, he'd still thought about me every single day. Sophie ran back to me. "Mom, can we come back here?" "Yeah, baby, we can. Can we build something?" I looked at the land again. Maybe. That night I sat down and wrote a letter, not to my parents, not to my siblings, but to Michael. I knew he'd never read it, but I needed to say it anyway. I wrote about my life, about Sophie, about the years I spent not knowing he existed, about the moment I found out, about how angry I was, and how sad, and how grateful. I wrote that I wished I'd known him, that I wished he'd fought harder, but that I understood why he didn't. And I wrote that I forgave him for not being there, because he'd done the one thing that mattered. He'd made sure I'd know the truth. When I finished, I folded the letter and put it in the folder with everything else Thomas had left me. Then I called Caleb. He answered on the second ring. "Ms. Ellison, I need to ask you something. Of course, did Thomas leave anything else? Anything about Michael, about his life?" He was quiet for a moment. He did. "There's a box, personal effects, letters, photos, a few items Michael left with him before he died. Mr. Vale kept them in storage. He instructed me to give them to you once the estate was settled. When can I get them? I can have them ready by tomorrow." The next day I went back to Caleb's office. He handed me a small cardboard box, taped shut, with my name written on the top in Thomas's handwriting. I took it home and set it on my kitchen table. Then I sat there for 20 minutes staring at it, trying to decide if I was ready. Finally, I opened it. Inside were letters, dozens of them, some addressed to my mother, some addressed to Thomas, some addressed to me, written over the years, dated, sealed, never sent. There were photographs, Michael as a young man, Michael with my mother, Michael alone, Michael holding me the day I was born. There was a small wooden box with a silver bracelet inside. Engraved on the back were the words, "For Mara, love, Dad." There was a journal, leather-bound, worn, filled with entries about his life, his regrets, his hopes for me. I read one entry dated June 1995. "Mara turned 5 today. I saw a photo. Elaine sent it to Thomas. She didn't know he showed it to me. Mara was wearing a yellow dress. She was smiling. She looked happy. I'm glad she doesn't know me. I'm glad she's not confused or hurt, but I'm also so sad because I'll never know her, and she'll never know me, and that's the deal I made. I just hope one day she understands that I didn't leave because I didn't care. I left because I did. I closed the journal and sat there crying for a long time, not because I was angry, but because I finally understood. Michael hadn't abandoned me. He'd been erased. And Thomas had spent 30 years making sure that when I was ready, I'd have proof. 2 months later, I got a call from Lena. Her voice was quiet. "Can we talk?" I thought about saying no, but I didn't. "Okay." We met at a coffee shop. Neutral ground. She sat down across from me and didn't say anything for a moment. Then she said, "I talked to Mom and Dad. I didn't respond. They're not going to apologize. I don't think they even think they did anything wrong." "I know." She looked down at her hands. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I was 15 when I overheard them talking about it. I didn't fully understand it then, but by the time I did, it felt too late. It wasn't too late, I know, but I was scared of what it would do, of what you'd think of me." I looked at her. "I don't think anything of you, Lena. I'm just tired." She nodded. "I get that." We sat in silence for a while. Then she said, "Are you going to talk to them again?" "I don't know. Maybe, someday, but not now." She nodded again. For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. I didn't do anything, I just stopped pretending." She smiled sadly. "That's exactly what I mean. I didn't reconcile with my parents. I didn't go to Christmas. I didn't call on birthdays. I just existed separately from them. And slowly, it started to feel less like loss and more like relief." Sophie asked about them once. "Why don't we see Grandma and Grandpa anymore?" I thought about how to answer. Then I said, "Because sometimes people hurt you, and you have to take space to heal." "Did they hurt you?" "Yeah, baby, they did." She thought about that. Then she said, "That's sad." "It is. But we're okay, right?" I hugged her. "Yeah, we're okay." I went back to the land a few times over the winter. I didn't build anything. I just walked. I sat. I let myself be still. And slowly, I started to feel like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Not because I'd won some battle, but because I'd stopped fighting to be seen by people who had decided a long time ago not to look. Here's what I learned. Family secrets don't protect you. They protect the people who made the mess in the first place. And when someone hands you the truth, even decades too late, even from beyond the grave, you take it. Because the truth doesn't owe you comfort, it just owes you clarity. And clarity is the only thing that lets you stop blaming yourself for other people's choices. Michael Caro wasn't perfect. He walked away. He signed papers. He let my mother rewrite history. But he also left me something. Not just land, not just money, but proof. Proof that I mattered to him. Proof that he thought about me. Proof that even when he couldn't be my father, he still tried to make sure I'd be okay. And Thomas Vale, a man I barely remembered, spent 30 years keeping that proof alive. Not because he wanted revenge, but because he believed I had a right to know who I was. So, if you're listening to this, and you've ever been told that the past doesn't matter, that old wounds should stay buried, that asking questions makes you difficult, I want you to know something. The past always matters, and the people who tell you it doesn't are usually the ones who benefited from you not knowing. You deserve the truth, even if it's painful, even if it changes everything, even if it costs you relationships you thought were solid. Because a relationship built on silence isn't solid, it's just quiet, and quiet isn't the same as peace. From my point of view, this story is a reminder that love isn't the same as honesty. And parents aren't always right just because they raised you. The people who truly care about you don't ask you to forget the truth. They help you carry it. So I'll ask you this. Have you ever discovered something that made you realize your entire life was built on someone else's lie? And if so, did you walk away or try to fix it? If this story meant something to you, if it reminded you that your right to the truth matters more than someone else's comfort, I'd be grateful if you'd subscribe. There are more stories like this, stories about people who stopped pretending, and I'd love to share them with you.